Right, you guys ready? Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the regular City Council meeting for Monday, May the 6th. I'd like to ask everybody that can to stand as we start every meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I have a couple of agenda addition deletion comments. Item B under presentations, we're going to defer to the next regular meeting. Mr. City Manager, you want to make a comment about old business B and C?
Right. The Charter Amendment CR 1-19, we need to reintroduce that. The document that was introduced was not accurate, and we need to restart on that, and we'll reintroduce it on June the 3rd. It won't have a negative effect on our bond acquisition. We just want to get it right. The number C, ordinance 0319, we failed to advertise that in the fashion that we're required to, and we're going to do that again. We will advertise it and have it on the agenda on June the 3rd. That's it, sir.
So we can, Council, we'll just move those to the next regular meeting?
Yes. Okay.
You should probably move to amend the agenda since this was published.
Okay, that's an easy, I'll take yes for the answer. Okay, presentations and proclamations. Mr. Wolfley. Madam Clerk, you want to accept this proclamation on behalf of all your professional colleagues?
Yes,
you want that answer?
Absolutely. All righty. Good evening. I have a proclamation that I'd like to share with everyone here, and it reads as such. Whereas the office of the municipal clerk, a time-honored and vital part of local government, exists throughout the world, and whereas the office of the municipal clerk is the oldest among public servants, and whereas the office of the municipal clerk provides professional link between the citizens, the local governing bodies, and agencies of government at other levels, and whereas municipal clerks have pledged to be ever mindful of their neutrality and impartiality, rendering equal service to all, and whereas the municipal clerk serves as the information center on functions of local government and community, and whereas municipal clerks continually strive to improve the administration of the affairs of the office of the municipal clerk through participation in education programs, seminars, workshops, and the annual meetings of their state, provincial, county, and international professional organizations. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the Council of the City of Bowie, Maryland, does hereby recognize the week of May 5 through May 11 as Municipal Clerks Week, and further extend appreciation to our municipal clerk, Awilda Hernandez, and to all municipal clerks for the vital services they perform and their exemplary dedication to their communities they represent. This is introduced and passed by the City of Bowie on May 6th, signed by Fred Robinson, Mayor, and interestingly enough, as always required, attested to by Awilda Hernandez, City Clerk. You see the importance she plays in everything we do, the irony of it all, right? So anyway, is there a motion for that?
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
She is really our boss.
She really is.
We all work with something.
Everyone has a boss.
Actually, sometimes she's grandmother.
Yes, I have many titles besides municipal clerk. But I just want to say this is actually, I just turned 7 years with the city on April 30th as their municipal clerk. I was a town clerk prior to that for the town of Indian Head and Charles County for 7 years also. So it's been an interesting job. When I first started over there, I did not know what a clerk did. so I was just thrown in, but I have grown to love the job, and is that I love it. I like taking care of these 7 gentlemen up here. Sometimes it could be too much, but they are good. Other than that, I do love serving the city of Bowie. It's been a great pleasure being here, and I look forward to spending many more years here in the city. Thank you.
Are we coming right back now?
No, we'll do this. Okay. For those of you that don't know, the city clerk really does an awful lot of the business side for us, in addition to keep us straight, and in my case, making sure I'm at the right place at the right time, well, most of the time. She's an incredibly valuable component of this department, or this city, so we're pleased to take an opportunity to recognize her and her professional colleagues. Okay, appointments and swearing in. Councilmember Sen Carter.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to appoint Cheryl Morris as a member of the Community Outreach Committee.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Mr. Marcos. Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Mr. Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move to appoint Mr. Kevin Dolby to the Environmental Advisory Committee.
Second by Mr. Marcos. Any question on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. Could we have Mr. Dolby and Ms. Morris join us, please? Congrats. Okay. We're starting to see you a lot.
Yes. This is my guy. He takes care of me often. How you doing, buddy?
Okay. All right, I'm going to ask you to raise, as soon as you finish using the other right hand, I'm going to ask you both to raise your right hand, and after I say aye, if you will follow with your name. I do swear or affirm.
He didn't get into statement. Go ahead, Kevin.
Kevin Dolby.
Yeah. Do swear or affirm
Do swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
and that I will
and that I will
be faithful and bear true allegiance
be faithful and bear true allegiance
to the state of Maryland,
to the state of Maryland,
and support the Constitution and laws thereof,
and support the Constitution and laws thereof,
and that I will,
and that I will,
to the best of my skill and judgment,
to the best of my skill and judgment,
diligently and faithfully,
diligently and faithfully,
without partiality or prejudice,
without partiality or prejudice,
execute the office of
execute the office of
regular member of the City Outreach Committee and regular member of the Environmental Advisory Committee,
a regular member of the Environmental Advisory Committee,
according to the Constitution and laws of the state.
according to the Constitution and laws of this state.
Congratulations. Thank you very much. Welcome aboard.
Thank you,
Thank you, sir.
sir.
Do you have one for me? Okay. Okay, city manager report.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council, and residents of Bowie. The city staff is, aside from delivering those services that we don't see unless they don't happen, we're doing that rather well, picking up the trash, enforcing the laws and the codes. We're working really hard toward the FY 2020 budget and working to get that completed, and that's taken up the focus, the most of our efforts here in the last several weeks. Thank you, sir.
All right. All right, council, we have a consent agenda with items A through G. Mr. Gardner, you wanted to make a request?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I'd like to remove consent agenda item B from the list to be voted on and separately vote on that.
Vote on separately? Okay, we
Yes,
can do
sir.
that. Hearing no objection. All right, you have items A, C, D, E, F, and G. Do I have a motion? Moved by Mr. Barker, second by Mr. Gardner. Any question on the motion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Approval of Resolution R26 supporting the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development. You had an issue you wanted to bring to our attention?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, because of my relationship with this organization, I'd like to recuse myself from voting from that.
Thank you, sir. Okay, any questions? Do I have a motion on R2619? Do I have a motion on R2619?
So moved.
Thank you. Second by Mr. St. Carter. Any questions on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. Old business A, FY 2020 budget, CIP constant yield, public hearing.
It's Mr. Mayor.
City Manager.
Thank you very much. Before I hand this over to Mr. Matthews, there's a state requirement that when the current tax rate brings in more money than we projected, we're required to have a discussion and bring forward and present to the residents just what that additional funding is, and also make a recommendation to the City Council as whether we should maintain the current tax rate or reduce it to accommodate the additional money. It is my position, and Mr. Matthews is going to explain it in more detail, that we should keep our tax rate the same. And we can talk about that more. Byron, go ahead and explain it to him, please.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you all. Good evening, City Council and Mayor. Byron Matthews, Finance Director. This evening, I'd like to explain the concept of the constant tax yield. The constant yield tax rate is calculated by the Department of Assessments and Taxation for each taxing authority in Maryland. It represents the real property tax for the coming tax year that will generate the same amount of revenue that was generated during the current tax year. As assessments increase, the constant yield tax rate decreases. Implicit in the concept is the ideal that the tax rate at or below the existing tax rate is a tax increase if it is higher than the constant yield tax rate. When the taxing authority plans to impose a real property tax rate that is higher than the constant yield tax rate, it must advertise the tax increase and hold a public hearing. If the taxing authority plans to maintain its real property tax rate for the current level, but above the constant yield tax rate, it must advertise and a hearing must be held. On April 18th, the City of Bowie published in the Washington Post the city's desire to increase its property tax above the constant tax yield rate. The advertisement read as follows. The City of Bowie proposes to increase the real property taxes. For the tax year beginning July 1, 2019, the estimate of real property assessable base will increase by 2.8% from $7,755,958,969 to $7,276,114,182. If the City of Bowie maintains the current tax rate of 40 cents per hundred of assessment, the real property tax rate will increase by 2.8%, resulting in $800,621 of new property tax revenue. In order to fully offset the effect of the increasing assessment, the real property tax rate should be reduced to 0.3890, the constant yield tax rate. The City of Bowie is considering not reducing its real property tax rate enough to fully offset the increasing assessments. The City of Bowie proposes to adopt a real property tax rate at 0.40 per $100 of assessment. This tax rate is 2.8% higher than the constant yield tax rate and will generate $800,621 in additional property tax revenue. Public hearing will be held on the proposed real property tax rate increase today at 8 p.m. at City Hall. Are there any questions?
Any questions of staff? All right, we have anybody signed up to speak? Public hearing? As I call your name, if you would come to the podium, identify yourself for the folks at home. First is our friend and former Mayor Gary Allen. He'll be followed by Patty McConaughey. Welcome, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Gary Allen. I'm chairman of your EAC, and I want to thank you very much for the previous actions of this council this evening in appointing a new member of our committee to advise you on environmental issues. Mr. Mayor, I appeared before you a month ago at a public hearing on the budget, and I provided at that time comments on about 5 different items. It's my intention to repeat that testimony here this evening. I just want to remind you that there are other items that we've all previously called to your attention. Rather this evening, I'd like to briefly highlight several items mentioned in the budget. Not repeating my comments, I just noticed that after your meeting the last time, in response to some of those comments, you reflected a little bit in the later part of the session about EV readiness and EV expansion and a look more to embrace more aggressively some of the opportunities provided to help make our community a little bit more friendly toward alternatively fueled vehicles. Accordingly, I've provided as an attachment to the copy of the testimony that is available to you at your podium this evening, a copy of a Greenfriets resolution that we provided as a recommendation to Council in 2016. This recommendation frames a policy as guidance to staff which would change the overall fleet mileage of the city's purchase of vehicles of any type over the next decade and raise that fleet mileage according to this policy based on currently available technology by at least 3% a year. In addition, it would allow us a move toward more decarbonizing the fleet. And finally, it would embrace as a priority the replacement of all new vehicles with either electric or hybrid vehicles because the lifespan of those vehicles, of which there are at least a half a dozen in your CIP before you in this budget cycle, would last a decade. So you're actually making decisions now that will affect the consequences of greenhouse gas emissions in this community for years into the future. And we call this policy to your attention as a way to direct staff to be more sensitive to the consequences of these long-term decisions and not merely just sensitive to the initial cash capital cost of those things, but to amortize those in terms of their overall environmental and economic impact over the entire decade. Having said that, I'd like to call your attention this evening to just 2 issues. One is to expand the pilot for curbside pickup and composting of residential food waste to the entire city within the next 2 years. We've had a pilot going on in this community now for 2 years. Staff in this fiscal year has begun to expand at that program, all through the use of simply a single vehicle. It's time to take a look at how that program can be more widely expanded throughout the entire community. I urge council to ask staff to aggressively investigate at least 2 options by which this could be accomplished this year and then expanded in the next fiscal year. One is by aggressively looking at whether or not city facilities themselves could be used as a composting site, emulating the model established by Prince George's County on a smaller scale here in the city. Our conversations with the Public Works Director indicates that this might be a very realistic and affordable alternative. But failing that, The county has in this fiscal year and last fiscal year, and is planning again in the coming fiscal year to expand its own operations for recycling and composting because of the impact, value, and benefits that they see to this particular technology. It's important to recognize that as they expand the adequacy of their own facility, it provides us with the opportunity to contract with them to receive waste generated in this community at the county facility. My impression, again, having talked with staff there and staff here, is that they are open to such negotiations. It's my hope that, again, as a part of these budget discussions, you could direct staff to pursue aggressively the opportunity that might be provided by this action by the county. Secondly, I'd like to encourage you to look at the cost and benefits of developing new drop-off sites for non-recyclable curbside pickup. The example that we've used with you in our previous conversations is clean styrofoam packaging and packing materials and coolers. These things are not recyclable and should not be landfilled. They last more than 500 years in the landfill. And yet there is available drop-off examples is the way I want to say it, where we could identify for less than $10,000 3 sites, north, central, and south here in Bowie, where such drop-off could be provided as a convenient, accessible, and visible opportunity for our citizens to deposit these materials in a way that could be collaboratively picked up with the industry, which is located less than 3 miles away in Crofton. They have stepped forward in previous conversations with our committee and said they would work cooperatively with us. There is a drop-off station there, which a few, and I emphasize very few, of our citizens use there. But wouldn't it be better if the 24,000 homes mentioned earlier had the option of simply dropping that off at a convenient and visible spot, 3 spots here in this community? Such facilities and drop-off sites cost less than $2,500, okay? And they would be an enormous step forward and allow this community to claim leadership and example of providing a otherwise unrecyclable product out of the landfill and give citizens an alternative to take it off our streets when the trash truck runs by. These are first steps, easy steps, cheap steps, which will help make this community a continued leader in the environmental area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Time.
I appreciate your comments. Patty McCoy, and should be followed by Ken. Unless you want to do it again. Last time you did it twofer.
No.
Okay. Welcome again, ma'am. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council, and as I've heard tonight, Ms. Hernandez especially. Thank you tonight for this opportunity to speak. My name is Patty McCoy. I know it doesn't look like McCoy. There's a lot of letters in it, but it's McCoy. So tonight I'm here to speak to you about UFOs, unfunded opportunities. So Old Town Bowie is an historic and important community and should not be overlooked when funding is needed to expand safe spaces for walking and cycling. There are very few places to safely walk and cross busy streets in Old Town Bowie. And the Heritage Trail offers us some of these opportunities. So the website, which has long promised and teased and tantalized us with its maps of its connections and quiet trails and opportunities for connecting the communities with parks, and maybe perhaps one day an historic university will be connected with an historic town. Over the last 2 funding years, a budget has been allocated for the completion or the continuation of Phase B, but sadly it's been diverted for other necessities. So while no one wants taxes to go up or essential services to be cut, it is my opinion that it is an essential service to the citizens of Bowie to provide safe and engaging outdoor spaces for each and every neighborhood in the city limits. So I would urge you this year, there has been budget allocated for Phase B to start. I would urge you to not divert it yet again and put this important trail on the UFO list. So that we need to keep this funding and we need to move this project forward and fulfill the opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
comments. Himself.
Good evening,
Welcome,
Mr.
sir.
Mayor and City Council. It's kind of hard to follow up on. Certainly won't try to compete with that. I'm definitely in support of similar things. I'm here to support trails in Bowie, and specifically the Bowie Heritage Trail Phase 2, which is ready as soon as funding is available. Permits are ready, plans are ready. And I'd like to point out that this trail appears as a rather prominent hub in all of the options that are being developed in the new Bowie Trails Master Plan that was reviewed and discussed and providing additional community input last Saturday. So I think it's important that we keep it in the budget, that we fund it, and try to fund the whole aspect of Phase 2, and not do just part of it, because we think this is an important piece that the city of Bowie and Old Bowie certainly deserves. And this is something, as Patty mentioned, has been talked about for a long time. Going by the city's webpage, they've been talking about it since 2008. So that's a long time. So we're on the cusp of getting this done and moving on to more and better things. So let's get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Dustin Kuzan. Welcome, sir. Good to see you again.
Hello, good to see you. Thanks for having me, Mayor, Council. My name is Dustin Kuzan. I am the head of the Multimodal Access and Public Spaces Group, which is a subgroup of the Green Team. I'm here today to echo what Ken and Patty has said and add a couple other things. I'd like to request that we fully fund the Phase 2 of the Heritage Trail. I noticed it's currently funded in the draft budget for $919,000. I'm not sure if that's the 100% of the cost of the project or whether it was reduced or not, but I hope that we're able to get this project completely built. Whether it spans 1 or 2 fiscal years, I think, just showing that commitment to funding trails projects shows a big commitment from the city to be progressive in the area of walking and biking. And, we've heard from a lot of citizens that they want to see this stuff. So this is, I think on an annual basis, I would really love to see this moving forward. And I'd like to thank you for allowing it to be in the draft budget this year. So I think this is a great step forward. Moving forward beyond this, we got the master plan that's going to be adopted later this year, and we'll hopefully see even more projects come out. And I'm hoping that we can continue to fund projects throughout the years. I think a key strategy to making that happen is going to be another item that was discussed. Gary brought this up at one of his, when he came out to speak to you guys about a position for a bicycle or multimodal specialist, a kind of a planner / project development coordinator. I don't think we're ready for it this fiscal year, but I do want to ask that we can start talking about it perhaps for next fiscal year. I think we need to start scoping out what that position can be, but I think there's a lot of benefits to that position. We need somebody who's going to focus on moving these types of projects forward, and the advantage of that for the budget, actually, when it comes to bringing in money, is that position, if they're focused on bringing in grant money, there's tons of grant money out there for these types of projects. There probably could have been a lot of grant money for this project as well, but I imagine there's a lot of intricacies of working through these grants, and you really need a person that understands this and can focus on moving through those intricacies. So this project, $900,000, we could have funded at least 80% of it or more if we went through through all these intricacies. So the value that this person can bring, this new position, can easily fund itself, 10, 15 times over on an annual basis. But again, it's kind of a unique set of skills and a unique focus. So I'd just like to ask that we start maybe talking about that position for the next fiscal year. I also like to echo support for the EV readiness. I think that even a benefit to the EV readiness is not just the carbon emissions, but also the fact that there's a bunch of people that want to buy electric vehicles, and the infrastructure is needed for them to be able to to purchase that. So this is us getting ahead of the market and providing those services so that people have other ways to get around, and we could be, kind of leaders in that area. And I also like to say that food waste and composting, I'm a big supporter of that as well. So the last month I actually started separating out just my food waste composting stuff from the recycling and trash, and that beyond my recycling, that was I had a lot more trash for composting than I did just regular old trash, and I think that probably applies to most people. So I think could be a lot of benefit in focusing on that program as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right, so all the people have signed up to speak, so I declare the public hearing to have been completed. Item next, city lobbyist report. Mr. Len Lucci. And what I want to say by way of introduction is Mr. Lucci's been our representative in Annapolis for the last several years, and he does something I could not do. He spends too many days in Annapolis with too many people. But in the time that you've been here, our relationships have improved there, and the results are clear. So on behalf of all of us, before you give us your report, I want to thank you for the years in past and what you did, particularly in this last legislative session. A lot of things are seen and some things are not seen, but I know you've saved our backside on a couple of occasions. Welcome, sir. You're here for a report on the last session.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of the Bowie City Council. It was indeed an honor and a pleasure for the 13th consecutive year to represent the city of Bowie in the Maryland General Assembly. This was a particularly poignant session because it began with the announcement that the Senate President had metastasized cancer, and it ended with the death of the Speaker of the House. So it was a very somber session. By the same token, at the same time, there were 60 new freshmen that had to be broken in. There were 17 new senators, 43 new delegates. Among them was our own delegate, Ron Watson, who was appointed to the Judiciary Committee. He serves on the Family Law Subcommittee and the Juvenile Law Subcommittee, which are two very important subcommittees. And we also had a team of seasoned veterans coming back. Senator Peters, who became, because of his seniority and his skills, the chair of the Senate Capital Budget Subcommittee, as well as the Senate Public Safety, Environment, and Transportation Subcommittee. So he had a great influence over what the outcome of the budget was. Delegate Valentino Smith served on the House Appropriations Committee, where she served as the vice chair of the Health and Human Services Subcommittee, and she was also the deputy majority whip. Delegate Marvin Holmes was the chair of the Housing and Real Property Subcommittee, another important area. So we had a great team to work with. I want to talk a little bit about things that affect Bowie that were in the capital budget. There was $300,000 to the Huntington Heritage Society to the purchase of a historic home in the Huntington section, $50,000 to the Champ House. There's money in there for a new electronic sign for Tasker Middle School. I don't think it'll be a blinking one all night, but a neon sign, but it'll be a nice sign. At our partner institution in this area, the Bowie State University, $5.1 million for the Communications, Arts, and Humanities building, and $1.4 million to rehabilitate Robinson Hall, a place where I went to kindergarten many, many years ago before they had public kindergarten. There's also affecting Bowie money for the final payment for the building of the new Capital Region Medical Center in Largo, which, although it's in Largo, will affect us because it's affiliated with Bowie Health Center. So Bowie Health Center will have a lot more direct services that it can provide through its partnership and affiliation with the new hospital center. It's $56.2 million to finish that. Also, of course, in the consolidated transportation plan of the budget that was adopted, there was $2.5 million to upgrade and widen existing Maryland 197 from Ken Hill Drive to Maryland 450. Now, $2.5 million will buy you maybe 10 feet of improvements. So that money must be going to planning, design, and engineering, but it still keeps the project moving along, and it's a very vital project that's been on the list for a very long time. Also affecting Bowie, but not directly, is the plan to bolster the public schools in Maryland. And so there is, for the past few years, been this commission called the QUORUM Commission, which the last time they had one of these was 20 years ago, the Thornton Commission, to revisit the formula for funding public schools. And although that's not a city function, there are many very fine schools in the city limits that are funded by that. So a down payment was made to increase funding this coming fiscal year of a 7% increase in the budget. But the big debate will be next year when they propose to redo the entire formula, which of course is going to cost a lot of money from both the counties and the state. And so both are going to be considering to some kind of revenue enhancement packages, probably not one big one, but a bunch to fit together. And so that will be the issue next year, and it will have its impact on Bowie. Finally, there was a piece of legislation regarding the treatment of personal property of automobile dealerships, which affected no counties, but affected some municipalities in Maryland, Bowie, College Park, Rockville, a few others, where the city was required to tax vehicles that are in the inventory, which are not necessarily owned by the dealership. They're really owned by the manufacturer, and they're there as a kind of a trustee. So the law that was eventually passed through a lot of discussion would allow the city to either partially or completely abolish that tax for those vehicles. And now, so that'll be taking effect July 1st, and that's something the city can decide to do. But once again, I do want to mention that my partner in crime, Mr. Eddie Pounds, cannot be here this evening, but he sends his regards. We have a true team because it's hard for one person to be everywhere all the time, and so the two of us kind of cover everything together. So thank you again for the opportunity to represent you in the city in Annapolis.
Thank you. Questions or guests? All right. Well, then let me just summarize it. Having had the experience of walking those halls up there with you and Mr. Pounds, there's a couple of things that are obvious. One is that you are a very well-respected team by the members of the legislature up there, and I'm sure that didn't occur overnight. And I've seen you and watched you represent the city in serious negotiations and serious presentations before a variety of committees up there. And I must say that watching that, I've always been impressed not only with your command of the issues, but your ability to work with people on both sides of the aisle up there, which is, in this day and age, quite unique and quite beneficial for us. So on behalf of all of us, I'd like to thank you for another good year, and thank you, for your professional service.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move to adjourn.
Who seconded that? Mr. Carter second that?
Yes. All in favor?
Everybody understand the motion? All in favor?
Okay.
Opposed?
Before you go.
Unanimous. Good night, folks.
All right. Good night.